So very good evening to all of you from wherever you're joining us. Welcome to the Chapter 4 Uganda Media Series, or the Human Rights Media Series, a couple of conversations intended to spur discussions and shape narratives as we approach the 2021 elections. Today we have a special guest who will be taking us through the topic of the day, which is censorship and the freedom of expression in Uganda's elections. Many of you know that Uganda will go into national elections beginning a couple of months from now. And so we would like to discuss the question of censorship in the lead up to the election. But before we start the discussion, let me just lay down a couple of ground rules. For those who are interested in joining us, please register with the Zoom link that have been shared publicly on our social media platforms. Once you register, you go into a waiting room before you're allowed to join the conversation. The purpose is to avoid people who don't have good intentions storming this useful conversation and distracting it. So once you're signed in, we'll allow you to come in once you're verified. If you're unable to sign in for one reason or another, but are still interested in following the discussion, we'll ask you to sign in to our Facebook page, which is Chapter 4 UG. This event is also being streamed live on the Facebook page. We'll also not be able to unmute yourself. We have taken control of the muting function to avoid disruptions in the discussion. And so if we want you to speak, we shall unmute your microphone. But for those of you who have comments, please send them through to our social media platforms, Twitter and Facebook. But you can also, if you're on this webinar, send in comments on our chat page. There's a chat function on the Zoom app there. We'll be able to take your comments at an appropriate time and communicate them. We'll use the last quarter of this discussion for Q&A. You're going to have to raise your hand, and once you raise your hand and you catch the eye of the person controlling the chat functions, you will be allowed to speak. I will ask you to keep your comments very crisp and very sharp in the interest of time to allow other people to be able to join the conversation. Thank you for joining us, and let me introduce our guest. Today, our conversation is with a renowned Ugandan writer, a government critic, somebody who in the last couple of weeks has been in the news for all manners of reasons. Please join me in welcoming our keynote discussant today, Kakwenza Rukirabashaija. The name is difficult for my Luo tongue, but I hope I have not done a bad job in pronouncing it. Welcome, my brother. Good to have you here.
Thank you, thank you.
How was your day? How was your day, sir?
Fine, been fine.
Fantastic. We are delighted to have you, and I'm sure many people online are also delighted to hear from you. Mr. Kakwenza has authored 2 books that have become bestsellers in Uganda. In fact, if you want to find it, you may not find it on the bookshelf because it's selling fast. The first book that he's become known for is a book called The Banana Republic, where writing is treasonous, a copy of which I hold in my hand. I'm going to be giving out 5 copies to people that I will choose from this discussion. His second book is called The Greedy Barbarian. We'll talk about this book. This book is the subject of our discussion this evening. In fact, this is the first book, sorry. The Greedy Barbarian is the first book. And then the second one, which is a chronicle of the events he went through. So just before we start, Mr. Kakwenza, I said this before the beginning of the live broadcast, that many people don't take the time to know the writer, the person behind the beautiful works of literature. And so we just want to start by asking you, Mr. Kakwenza, who is Kakwenza?
Thank you, Council. Mr. Kakwenza is a Ugandan law student, farmer. I'm a writer. I write political satire. I write erotica. I criticize the government. I'm 32 years. I think that is the little you can know about me.
I mean, for many people, you bolted to the headlines. They had no chance to know who you are. So thank you for sharing this with us. We talked a bit again before the beginning of this show about your surname or your other name. It's quite an interesting name. Do you want to share with those who are tuning in what the name means?
Rukirabashaija.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if you were to translate it into Rukororo, it means bigger than all men. So I think, yeah, physically, I am bigger than all men. I'm not sure about financially and part of it.
One thing is for sure, your work stands tall or shoulder and above everybody else that I've read in the last couple of months. So just by way of introduction, your first book that you wrote, which was about the Greedy Barbarian, which describes a leader who was a fictional leader who has been in power and hangs on to power. Could you just speak a bit about that book? What inspired the writing of that book? And some of the things that you think stands out from that first book, The Greedy Barbarian?
The book, Greedy Barbarian, I sat home, I think I was bored, I had nothing to do. It was drought, I was not going to the farm, so I sat down and I said, let me write something. So I created a country, I created people, characters, and, started developing content. And, I started developing the book. I started writing, and eventually the whole information kept on flowing. Chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, that is where I had to put in some politics, finalizing the book, finalizing the characters. I had not actually, when I started writing it, I had not thought about that it would end as a political satire. No. I started writing it having a picture of an African society, an African village. But when I kept on writing, you know how creativity is. You write something, then the information flows, and it gives you direction. So the character, the main character, the protagonist, Kayibanda,
Yeah.
When he grew up, like after the university, that is when I decided that, no, let me turn him into a barbarian, a politician who leads a country, who fights for change, who fights to bring a fundamental change, who fights corruption, who fights every evil in our political society.
Yeah.
So as I wrote on and on, I was like, now, okay, let me kill my character. So I had to kill him.
Yeah.
Yeah, you read and you see that I killed my character. And I brought in another character.
What is the main thesis in the book? Is this about a fictional leader who migrates to another country, wages a rebellion, and takes over power and hangs on to power for so long? Is that the main thesis of the book? Could you speak to the main thesis of the book?
Yes, exactly.
You will not be surprised that, like many works of literature in the past, that sort of analogy fits really very perfectly to what many people think is the real life situation. And perhaps that is what may have caused you troubles. But after you wrote that book, you were promptly arrested. Could you describe to us what happened after your first book was published?
So after my first book was published, it was actually a hot cake in Kampala. I sold off all the copies. Then eventually, after I had ordered for another batch of copies to be published, that is when I was picked from my home and I was arrested. So
Can you describe what happened on the day you were arrested?
So I was in bed. Actually, I was in bed doing some work, some academic work, when my wife comes and tells me that, you know what, we are under siege. The military men have already entered the house to arrest you. So she had not yet even finished talking about it, reporting it to me, and I jumped. And I stood in the bedroom and they started entering in and they ordered me to dress up. They handcuffed me, they chained my legs, and they bundled me into their vehicle and they drove me to CMI.
You said these were military men. Were you able to identify them? If so, how were you able to identify them when they stormed your residence?
They had identity cards showing CMI, that is Chieftains of Military Intelligence. There was 2 police officers from Uganda. So they were about 15, 17 in number, all of them. Yeah. They had guns. Some of them were in uniform. Some of them were not in uniform. They, of course, I could not scrutinize on their identity cards to see their names, but I only saw Chieftains of Military Intelligence. So I did as they ordered, and they took me.
Where did they take you, Kakwenza, for just a writer for a book of a fictional nature? The Bible says the wicked would run before their names are called. Why would they pick you, do you think, for your work?
Maybe, I don't know, when they read my book, they thought I had written an autobiography about the president. I don't know.
Museveni.
Yes, that is Museveni. I don't know whether my imaginations are connected to Mr. Museveni's origin. I don't know where he came from. I don't know whether he came from the country I wrote about and migrated to another country. And he was miserable with his mother, and, you know, he passed through difficult times to get an education. You know, he found himself in politics and, you know, waging a war against a legitimate government. You know, I don't know how he managed to reconcile my story with his origin, with his life, with his biography.
Yeah, but let's just back up a bit. We'll come back to how you arrive at that as a conclusion and reason for your arrest. You state that you were driven in a motor vehicle by officers, a combined force of Chieftains of Military Intelligence and the Uganda Police Force. Do you now, as we sit here, know where you were taken to? And when you were taken there, what happened to you?
So they drove me to, of course, towards Kampala. I knew that they would take me to Kampala because they were CMI. I knew that they were taking me to Mbuya. So when we reached Reka, I could see everything. They covered my head with a beanie. And as a frequent user of that road, I knew that maybe they were taking me to SIU in Reka. But we kept on driving, and suddenly the environment changed, as if I could hear the boots, the military boots on the ground. I could hear very many words, Kiswahili words. And somehow I could see the ground. I could see like it is a military barracks.
Yeah.
So that is why I was taken. And when they took me up to meet I think the director of CMI, I don't know who, because he didn't tell me his name.
Can you describe this gentleman? Maybe we can figure out who he is. Was he tall, lanky?
No, very short, kind of, I think he's a Muslim with a mark here. Very rude, you know. And remember that time, it was a time of fasting. Yeah. Yes, when I think it was an Easter Monday when I was arrested.
Yeah.
So we go there. He asks me very many questions. I ask him to tell me who he is. He refuses. I tell him that I have a right to access my lawyer. He starts becoming arrogant on me, and he calls his boys downstairs to come and pick me. So they cover me again, they handcuff me again, and they take me. They take me and put me in a toilet where I was hanged, and I spent a night there.
Many people are arrested and taken to illegal, ungazetted places of detention. Those of us who are on this side of the world have no idea what happened. Can you just describe a little bit, for the first time when you were taken to what you now know to have been the headquarters of the Chieftaincy of Military Intelligence, can you describe what happened to you? We've had untold stories of torture. What happened to you while you were in their hands?
So when I was taken to the toilet, I thought maybe they had taken me to use the toilet. I had not even asked that, please take me to the toilet. But when they took me to the toilet, I knew that they had taken me to use the toilet, and I was ready to use the toilet. So I sit on the toilet to use it. And suddenly, in the middle of that, the person who had taken me there comes back and finds me shitting. And he kicks me. He tells me that it is not a toilet. It is actually a room. It is my room where I was supposed to sleep. So he gets my head, he sinks it into the toilet bowl and tells me to eat my shit, my constipated shit. So he tells me to eat the shit, he sinks my head into the toilet. I almost ate my shit, and he kicked me again, and he brought water and he poured in there. So he tells me that this is your room, it is not a toilet.
So they take you into a toilet, which was supposed to be your detention facility.
Yes.
And you naively mistook that to mean they were taking you to answer the call of nature.
Yes.
And you sit on the toilet bowl and excrete, essentially. And while you're in the middle of your of easing yourself, the person walks back in and finds you sitting on a toilet bowl and admonishes you, kicks you for using a toilet.
Yes, exactly.
And then holds your head onto the water and the human excrete in the toilet and asks you to eat it.
Exactly. So he gets annoyed, he goes out, he brings a basin full of water, he pours in there. Then he gets my hands, he ties me on the wall. The wall has jutting iron bars. So he puts me there, he handcuffs me and chains me there. Then he chains my legs on a toilet bowl. So I spent the night like that in the toilet, stretched.
So he brings water in a container to flush down your human excrete.
Yes.
And then chains you on the toilet wall that has iron bars. That's where you spend your night?
Exactly.
How did you feel when you were going through this?
I thought actually I would die. I just prayed my last prayers, and I thought that it was the end of me. I'd never been to a torture chamber. I'd never been arrested and taken to an illegal detention.
I suppose then that they subsequently interrogated you. What were you being interrogated about?
They were interrogating me. The following day, they came, they removed me from where they had chained me. They served me porridge. Then they took me to the interrogation room. Of course, they cover your head, they handcuff you, they chain you, you cannot see anything. So they tell you to move, and you ask them, move where I cannot see. Then they kick you and you fall. They punch you. So I was led to an interrogation room. They put for me stones down and they told me to kneel on them. Not soft stones, but very sharp stones. So I kneel on them, I raise my hands, I remain there and I wait for questions. They start interrogating me about my book, The Greedy Barbarian, the characters. They beat me up to tell them my password for computer, my passwords for Facebook. They start checking on my Facebook wall. They start asking me about everything I post. They start telling me to explain. They start telling me to explain every character in my book in relation to the Ugandan politics. They start telling me, explain who is Uganda.
Yeah.
Sorry? Yes.
Go on.
Yes, and during interrogation, they hit your head, they hit your back, you know, they tie you kandoya, they tell you to do this, very nasty things you cannot imagine, indescribable.
So kandoya is when both of your hands are tied in your back, right?
Yes, they are tied in the back and
your chest is out.
You're just there motionless.
Great. So they thought that your book was about the President of the Republic, did they?
Exactly.
Why would they think your book was about President Museveni when, in fact, your characters are fictional? Do you have a sense now that you came out? Do you know why they thought your book was about President Museveni?
I think they saw the cover page, the cover photo of a cartoon of a very plump man with a gun, with a hat. So, of course, they related it to the president, the AK-47, the gun, the half-eaten plates, you know. I actually instructed the designer to design it in a way that to show someone who is really greedy, a politician who is greedy. So that is why he has a gun, he has plates, he ate food and finished and also ate the plates.
Yeah.
So
the person in the picture
thought that I wrote about Mr. Museveni, and it is not true.
The person in the picture, though, in the cover page, bears no resemblance whatsoever to President Museveni, who lately we have seen as a very trimmed old man doing 40 press-ups. So I must just say, he doesn't look anywhere close. But you eventually end up being charged in a magistrate's court for an offense unrelated to what you've just described. Can you just explain how that happened?
Actually, I had them debate on which charges to prefer against me in the torture chamber. What do we charge with this idiot? Should we charge him with harassing the president? Should we charge him with defamation? Should we charge him with... and remember, they were on a lot of pressure. The High Court had issued out a writ of habeas corpus. So they were on pressure. That is why they drove me all the way from Kampala and they took me to Uganda. So I don't know how they came up with such. Yet they found me in bed, my bed sleeping. And you know, actually when the charges were read out to me, I actually laughed in court. I was in a lot of pain, but I laughed. I was expecting to be charged with defamation.
So you say that your tormentors were discussing what charges to prefer against you, and they're talking about defamation, disturbing the peace of the president, and many other things. Yes. But eventually they charged you with a COVID-19 related offense. Can you tell us what that offense was?
They charged me with an act likely to spread coronavirus, an act likely to spread a disease that is coronavirus.
So you're suggesting that CMI then was working with the Uganda police. They handed you over to Uganda police, who took you to the Directorate of Public Prosecutions and charged you with this offense?
Actually, they never took me to the police. They never took me to any police. Because when I was taken on Monday, I slept at CMI, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And all those days were days of torture, interrogation. Every day they would pick me from my room, from the toilet, and they take me. Sometimes, like 2 nights, they hanged me. actually hanging me on the stairs on the rails to the stairs, and I spent nights there. So they did not take me to any police station. It was on Saturday night when I was taken to ISU, because I had complained to them that now a very tall person like me to take me in a toilet, a very tiny toilet, I cannot stretch myself. I need to sleep. So they took me to SIU, where I slept on Saturday and Sunday. Then on Monday, I was picked up very early in the morning at 6. And
SIU is a police facility. It is the Special Investigations Unit of the Uganda Police Force.
Yes.
That's where you spent your weekend and you were then taken to court. You also said that your lawyers had obtained an order from the Chief Magistrate's Court for unconditional release. This order was defied, was it?
I think it was. I think it was issued out on a Thursday.
Yeah.
Yes. Then I was taken to court on a Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then the court remanded you to prison. You subsequently came out.
Yes.
On court bail, and you still face those charges up until now.
No, the charge, I was actually acquitted. Then later, when I wrote my Chronicles, that is when I was picked up again and taken again to the CMI. I'm still battling with the charge.
We'll come back to your second book, because I think it is important to lay the background that your fictional works led to your arrest, your torture, your intimidation, on account that you may have been describing the person of the president in your fictional book, The Greedy Barbarian.
Exactly.
When you published the first book, you got arrested and got tortured, subsequently charged in a court of law for an unrelated offense, which is a COVID-19 offense, and you were remanded to prison, eventually released on a court bail. Many people would be very scared, but you, Mr. Kakwenza, is a different breed of writer. You did something historic. I don't recount many people who have been in the hands of the CMI having the balls to write, to chronicle in a book about what happened. You chronicle in very graphic details what happened to you when you were detained by the CMI in your subsequent book called The Banana Republic. You write about your tormentors when they're still alive. You are a man of courage. What drove you to write this second book about your account?
You know, these I should call them hoodlums, CMI hoodlums. You know, when you torture a writer, of course he bleeds ink. I cannot take it with equanimity. They torture me and I just keep quiet. I'm a writer. I have to document. I have to put their impunity on a paper. So when they tortured me, they gave me what to write about. It's not that I wrote about my Chronicles enjoying. I was actually, it was a painful process.
Yeah.
I gave my wife a book to read, exactly that one, A Banana Republic. I saw her reading it, crying, shedding tears, tears rolling down her cheeks.
Yeah. Could you just take excerpts from that book and read for us so we understand what
For example, we should not have known about the Chinewachebes, the Nguji Wathiongos, if they had not been, if they had not faced the same consequences I am facing right now. We should not have known about them.
Sure.
So they tortured them, and they kept on writing.
Can you just take an excerpt from that book and read for us your account of what happened to you while in detention for the first time with CMI?
Let me look for a reading one. I'm looking for where I wrote, where they hanged me and I said bye-bye to the world, and the following day I resurrected when they were waterboarding me.
While you look for that, I can take a reading from page 35. On page 35, you describe what happened to you, and here's what you write. That I cursed the president and his men who had violated my non-derogable rights with such impunity. I knew that the following day, the brutes would interrogate me at gunpoint. I was neither a terrorist nor a deserter, nor someone who was threatening the president's continued stay in power by contesting against him in the next election. I was just a writer, a political fiction work that was selling like hotcakes in Kampala. In fact, the first printout ran out and was sold out. Have you got the page you want to read?
Yes.
Great, go ahead, sir.
That is page 42.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
That evening, another officer who also reeked of tobacco picked me up from the interrogation room and led me to the stairs, where he instructed me to stand and wait. I was only dressed in a vest and a pair of boxers. When he returned, precisely after a minute, he instructed me to stretch my hands to the upper rail of the stairs, and he tied my hands there. When he moved down and tied my legs to the lower rail, thus my body stretched between the upper and the lower rails of the stairs. I said, "Sir, you have overstretched me. Please loosen a bit, I beg. You are being punished for lying. I am doing exactly as they have instructed me," he said. So I said, "So you are a robot being controlled by remote?" I tried to crack a joke, but the person at whose expense I was doing so seemed oblivious of my attempt. He hanged me up on the rails, and I started thinking about how Jews had hung Jesus on the cross. Through the small hole in the beanie, I could see everyone who was walking out of the building because the stairs where I had been hung were near the entrance. I could see men and women in uniform, some in casual wear and others in suits. With their bags in their hands, they were sauntering out as they chatted away in groups. Though the vision was not very clear, I could at least see the blood silhouettes of human robots hired by the government to dehumanize Ugandans. I had given up on life when the excruciating pain became unbearable. I couldn't even speak, so couldn't call out for help. My whole body had become numb. I couldn't feel the chains much as I could see my bare legs and feet. I knew I was dying when I felt my eyes popping out of the sockets. I called upon God. I asked him to forgive my tormentors and to revenge on my behalf. I asked him to bless my wife and children with knowledge, life, wealth, wisdom, and power. I asked God to forgive me all the sins I had committed and to welcome me into his kingdom. It was around midnight that I passed out. The cold, excruciating pain, desperation, and misery were all forgotten. When I gained consciousness in the morning, I was lying in the corridor, prostrate, but still chained. I didn't feel anyone removing me from where I had been hung. When I became conscious again, I saw through the small hole in the beanie the doctor who had visited my toilet gather up his things, which I couldn't identify clearly, and walked away. My whole body was itchy, but I couldn't scratch it because my hands were handcuffed. The doctor had finished administering injections, perhaps of anti-inflammatory drugs, to my body. I asked myself why the government would torture me to near death and still care enough to administer medicine. That is page 43, 42 and 43.
Well, just reading this alone, you get chills down your spine, and how somebody would subject another to this sort of treatment, much less just a writer. But Mr. Kakwenza, you should have known that this was coming, because previous writers in Uganda have faced censorship, and in many cases have faced the brute force of the state. Daniel Kalinachi of the Daily Monitor wrote a book about Dr. Kizza Besigye called The Unfinished Revolution. The book was for many months detained at the border and eventually was allowed to come into the country. Dr. Kizza Besigye's sister, Dr. Olive Kobesigye, also wrote a book called The Correct Line, which was for many months again banned. Mr. Morrison Okakamba, while he was still the ED of Twaweza, East Africa, an organization, published calendars with pictures of opposition politicians asking for people to take charge of their destiny. Those calendars were subsequently impounded at Mutukula border and destroyed at the CID headquarters. You should have seen this coming, didn't you see it?
When I wrote The Greedy Barbarian, of course, I could not imagine that someone would come from nowhere and say, look, this is an autobiography about me, or a biography about me. I could not imagine, though very many people, many friends or readers, they would say, no, you man, this is another great work of African literature, political satire, but have it in mind that anytime soon they will come and pick you. And I was like, now, they pick me for what? For writing knowledge, for writing African literature, for thinking. Everything that is in my book, it is just, I expressed myself. I wrote down the knowledge, whatever was in my head, I put it in papers.
But you didn't expect that this would be...
I did not, in Stamp 7, to say that it is a biography about him. So right now, if you're reading through Animal Farm, can you say that George Orwell actually wrote about Mr. 7 and his NRM? No.
Yeah.
So you write something and you come and you accredit it to yourself and you say, this is me, I don't even understand, yet it's just political satire. I thought about things and I wrote them down. A work of imagination.
Another human rights activist, Dr. Adrian Juko, the executive director of the Human Rights Awareness and Promotion Forum, has also had his PhD thesis, which talks about litigating for the rights of sexual minorities in Africa, has had his books impounded and taken to the president's office under the Ministry of Ethics and Integrity for censoring. Clearly, normally in a period of contestation, such as the one we're in, there's increased focus on writers. What is the impact of this, Mr. Kakwenza, do you think, on the works of writers, artists, and other people who would want to write? What do you think is the impact of this torture that you've gone through, first on yourself and on your family, but also on the general literal world in Uganda?
You see, writing something and you publish it and you put it out there in public, it will, of course, it is a permanent publication to be read by the current generation, to be read by our posterity, of course. So these dictators, they think that they can hamper our creativity. They can gag us, they can stop us from writing whatever we want to write about. I don't really understand why would an 80-year-old dictator stop me from, stop a 32-year-old youth, me, myself, from writing down something, from imagining, from using my knowledge. From using my knowledge, and I put it in a book. The knowledge which cannot even deny him votes. If he thinks that whatever I have written about or whatever we are doing is not right, or if we are pointing, actually, if we are pointing, the main purpose of literature is we use literature to express ourselves and to speak out. If you are corrupt, and I come up with a book of fiction against corruption, why would you get annoyed?
Yeah,
but art is actually a kind of a reflection in which art is a reflection. They said art is a reflection in which society does what? Forgetting. So if I write my literature and someone comes and says, no, you have done bad, we are sensitizing the people that corruption is bad, vote rigging is bad. So if we talk against vote rigging and corruption, against human rights abuses, now, like, for example, whatever I went through in the torture chamber, in the dungeon, CMI dungeon, did they expect me to just go home and keep quiet? I had to write about it. I had to write about it, and I expose them. If they want, they can read my work and they change on the way they behave.
Okay. I just wanted to just go back a bit and ask you on your personal life, because in the book, The Banana Republic, you speak of the armed men storming your house, and your house manager, your wife, and your members of your family were left crying. What has been the impact on this on them subsequently?
Actually, for me, I have healed. Psychologically, I have healed. But my wife, my children, our house manager, our friends, they have never healed. All the time they think that I'm going to be arrested. All the time they are so conscious. Whenever they see a vehicle turning in front of our compound, I mean in front of our gate, they think that they are CMI hooligans, they have come back. So they all, it created, I think, a permanent psychological problem, my wife and children. Every time we are driving around and they see a gun, my children, they start crying. They think that these guys have come back for dad.
Yeah.
My wife is always telling me, please stop writing. They will come back and arrest you.
We have Kakwenza seen recently regulations, a raft of regulations, about 19 of them from the Uganda Communications Commission, some of which targets artistic work and works of musicians, writers, and stage performers. Do you think that the regulations that were enacted by the Uganda Communications Commission, coupled with what we have seen security agencies do to writers like you, do you think that the artistic world is being targeted in the run-up to the election, and that their works are being censored or banned for purely a political reason?
Of course, their target is to hamper. Their target is to hamper our work. They know that we express our feelings in the books, in poems, So, as I told you before, art reflects the society of its times. So if our society is very bad, we have to use art to fight against it. If we cannot get guns to fight against it, we can use art to fight against it. If we cannot go on the streets to demonstrate against our evil society, our evil leaders, we can put the literature in the books for people to read, and we open their eyes.
Arthur Seriko from the Network of Public Interest Lawyers, NetPL, at the Makerere Law School writes here that the hand is mightier than the sword. The gun may silence the mouth, but not the pen. The pen is thus mightier than the sword. Thank you, Arthur, for that. I just want to encourage people who are online, if you want to send any questions, please use the chat function. If you want to speak, raise your hand and our moderator will pick you and give you a chance to ask Kakwenza a question or make a comment. But to come back to Mr. Kakwenza, many international organizations, Amnesty International, PEN International, have come out with very strong statements asking the state to drop all charges against you. I must say you're still facing charges of sectarianism. Do you feel that the support around human rights defenders and writers like you are useful, and if so, what more can be done to ensure that writers are allowed to write and artists are allowed to express themselves?
Actually, the international organizations, civil society organizations, including Chapter 4 Uganda, and International Amnesty, they create a lot of awareness they are a mirror through which Uganda is seen outside there. They write, like for example, when I was arrested and PEN International wrote about me, Amnesty International wrote about me, actually outside there, the world outside, they came to know about my work. The human rights violations in Uganda, it came to their attention that Mr. Museveni is presiding over a country where human rights are not respected.
In other words,
you can imagine a country where they arrest someone and they actually hang him. Which generation?
In other words, targeting writers, journalists, artists from expressing themselves, subduing them using brutal force is not just unlawful, but also counterproductive, and that it casts the country in very, very bad light. Some might say it reveals the true nature of the people who are in power, as intolerant, as thin-skinned, and unable to tolerate any word of dissent. Do you think that the actions of the state is in fact counterproductive, and that it doesn't achieve what they think it will achieve?
It's actually barbaric. Someone produces an intellectual work, you counter it with violence. What is the purpose of courts? We are supposed to be ruled by law. We are not supposed to be ruled by torture chambers or guns. If I have done wrong, summon me, take me to court. But why would you take me to a torture chamber for 6 days torturing me? You take me to court when I am limping, and you charge me. You charge me with trumped up charges. So I expect rule of law to prevail. If I have done wrong, if I have defamed someone, they should say, look, we are taking you to court for this and that. But taking me to the torture chamber as if they are the ones to judge that I did wrong is actually barbaric. I remember President Museveni said that I will not preside over a country whereby someone is taken and no one knows where he is, someone is tortured, someone is killed, and the perpetrators are not brought to book. But the same things that he fought against are the same things that he has repeated and even done more. He has done more human rights abuses, more than Amin.
If you were to meet President Museveni now and you're speaking to him, what would you tell him?
To meet Mr. Museveni right now.
Just imagine the point of view, what would you say to him?
I tell him that now, Mr. President, for 35 years, honestly, a president, and you're still hungering for more power. What have you done? I mean, what have you not done that you're going to do in the next 5 years? I'll tell him point blank that please, let other people take over. We have Baby Wine, we have Mujisha Muntu, we have Norbert Mao. They are all intelligent people. We have Patrick Amriat, we have Chiza Besje. We have very intelligent people that can take the country forward.
Okay.
People who respect human rights, who can respect rule of law.
Okay. Christina Mogwanya writes, Kakwenza says, thank you for standing out and show that the mighty work of the pen. It is sad to see that a few writers there in our country go through such uncalled for torture. Again, if you have comments, if you want to speak to Kakwenza, do raise your hand. I've seen your message, Jackie. You can only win yourself a book if you ask a question. So you have a few minutes to do so, to engage Mr. Kakwenza. But Kakwenza, if I can turn back to you and say, do you feel that the courts of law, the institutions of the state that are supposed to protect people are doing a good job? Because you were taken to court. Some might argue you faced due process. The court has in fact dismissed one of the charges against you that were COVID related.
Sorry, what is the question again?
I said, do you think that the courts of law, the institutions of government that are supposed to protect people from such heinous acts are doing a good job in protecting writers, artists, etc.? And I said some might argue that the courts were fair to you and dismissed the charges that were levied against you in the first place. What is your view on what the court is doing to protect fundamental rights and freedoms?
Who appoints the judges? Who appoints the judicial officers? It is Museveni. Of course, they have to do whatever he tells them. They have to respect the appointing authority. If they get authority, I mean, if they are appointed by the president, of course, they have to do what he wants. They do otherwise, they will not get a promotion, maybe. The mere fact that I was acquitted, it doesn't take away the fact that other victims, like Kizza Besigye or like Bobby Wine, they have gone through a lot, and which is actually perpetrated by the judiciary. Mr. Besigye, Dr. Besigye has lost elections. I mean, he has lost cases, election case petitions.
Yeah.
They are like, for example, in 2016.
Yeah.
What happened in 2016, I cannot say that judiciary is independent. No. If they were fair to me, they were not fair to my fellow victim. So,
okay. Yeah.
If they are to be fair, they have to be completely fair to everyone, every victim.
Okay, there are two questions here coming online. I'll take the first one from Perry Aritua. Perry is the Executive Director of the Women's Democracy Network. Perry asked a question, and she says, have you, through your lawyers, pursued or thought about using the Human Rights Enforcement Act against those who tortured you? And the second question coming in there is from Patrick Mugalula. Patrick asked, do you think the meting out of state-sponsored violence on dissidents and critics inadvertently promotes self-censorship amongst other would-be artists? In other words, do you think this work has an impact on other artists? Two questions there for you, the Human Rights Enforcement Act, and do you think that this, your treatment has a chilling effect on other artists and writers?
Of course. Today it is me, tomorrow it can be someone. The other year was Stella Nyanzi. The other year was Daniel Kalnachi. The other year was Dr. Kobusinje. And today it is me. Tomorrow it could be someone else. They tortured me. Actually, the introductory poem of this book, Banana Republic, by Kagaingo, the poet, they had to beat me. They had to beat me in the head and punched me in the eyes because of this poem, telling me to explain. So tomorrow they might come back for, they might come and pick this poet, Kagaingo. So we have to fight using every means that we have. We fight against this vice. Let us all write. The dictator will not arrest all of us.
So you're saying that this has an impact on other writers that might be afraid to write, but that you also encourage them to use the pen and write. But the question from Perry, have you considered suing your tormentors using the Human Rights Enforcement Act?
Actually, I'm in the process. My lawyer and I, we are in the process of suing the government, torturing. I am a Ugandan citizen. They cannot. I am a human being. I have inherent rights. They cannot take me and they hang me. They make me eat my shit. They punch into my eyes. They hit my head with gun butts. They beat me to the extent that I started urinating blood. By the time I came out of the prison, my kidneys were damaged. I had inflammations all over my body. So I cannot just take it like that. I have to take them to court. They have to answer.
Okay, so you're pursuing justice there, and we hope that that case comes to court soon, and that you also consider suing the individual officers for command responsibility. In this case, the Director General of the Chieftaincy for Military Intelligence. Jacqueline Asimwe has earned herself copies of both of your books. She posts a question and says, very moving story, Kakwenza. My heart goes out to you for all you went through and for your courage under this fire. I believe that that art is like prophecy. However, one seeks to muzzle prophecy, the prophet will always speak out because his or her words are not their own in that sense. Words come from a well so deep that it bubbles out on its own. I know he will continue to write, and I salute him for this. We need an urgent conversation with our rulers about the central role of art and the advancement politically, economically, and socially. A message there from you, Jackie, to you. What do you have to say to Jackie? Jackie says, good job. Thanks for your courage. You're inspiring many people. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I'm just saying there are words of encouragement from Jackie. But if you are to, Uganda is going into an election. In fact, we're in the middle of an election cycle. And in this election cycle, something unique has happened, that we've seen a very prominent role of artists, journalists. We've also seen their role, not just in being actively involved in the electoral process, but also because of the nature of the election, the media is becoming a very important medium for delivering this election, what we are calling quote unquote scientific election. But in fact, it is digital elections, elections mainly carried out online and using electronic means. What are the concerns you have in this electoral period over and above the torture of artists, the muzzling of people who want to speak? What are some of the concerns you have? Because in your other life, you're also a very big supporter of the FDC and Dr. Kakwenza Rukirabashaija.
Because as usual, I've been following politics, or I've been active in politics since 2001. I've been a voter since 2001, and we have not had a violence-free election period. Every election, it is characterized by violence, military, police, beating up opposition politicians and their agents. So I do not even have hope that since this one will be a scientific election, that it will also go peaceful. No, because campaign is supposed to be done on radios and televisions. We have seen most times Dr. Kakwenza Rukirabashaija and other opposition figures denied access to the radio stations, to the TVs, to the television stations. We have seen that. So we cannot expect that now that it is where they are supposed to be going to campaign. Of course, I do not expect them to be allowed, no. Still, okay, they will be even pulled out from the live broadcast. So there is nothing good to expect from Mr. Museveni, an election organized by Mr. Museveni. Nothing, totally.
What do you recommend?
We expect the usual violation of rights, usual battling, usual,
In the face of what you describe as an unfair electoral process and an even electoral process, what do you advise then that the people should do? Because it's going to be tough times. What options do people have? Secondly, there's a question from Jackie. The question goes to chapter 4 and other organizations that stand up against human rights violation. I think it is high time we set up a defenders fund, particularly for artists. What are your thoughts? Jackie, great idea. We will be speaking to people who support our work to see if that can be done. But I think the broader approach has to be that we must defend the rights of everyone and ensure that people have the freedom to express themselves regardless of their party, regardless of their sexual orientation, regardless of their religion or tribe. So we'll try and do that to the best of our abilities, as we have done in the past, to provide legal defense for human rights. I also think it is important, Jackie, that we do document meticulously these human rights violations, because we must have an accurate account of history. Power, the protection of power is temporary. There are many people who have been in power and eventually go. When the moment is right, we should be able to hold them to account. They may be in power now, enjoy the protection of the state, but if we document human rights violations accurately, we'll have a basis for holding them to account in the future. There are also many other groups, such as the Network for Public Interest Lawyers, Defenders Protection Initiative, that are providing protection services to human rights defenders. Artists are but part of the wider family of human rights defenders. We will focus on challenging the new onslaught on artists and the media, beginning with the regulations passed by the Uganda Communications Commission, in fact, signed by the Minister for ICT. We will also make sure that artists who face arrests, like Mr. Boyo, who was arrested and charged before the Makindye Magistrate Court, get legal services, and due process is done to them. So thank you very much, Jackie. We shall be knocking on your doors very, very soon. I don't see a hand up in the participants section, so I assume that nobody wants to speak to Kakwenza. But if there's anybody who wants to speak to Kakwenza, please, there's a blue hand. The blue is really from Zoom. It has nothing to do with any party. Just click on there. We'll see your hand raised and we'll give you a chance. We have just under about 25 minutes to close this discussion. We do not want to be victims of the curfew here in Uganda. So if you have any questions, please ask. But let me return to you, Mr. Kakwenza. Many people have asked where they can get copies of your book. Of course, Jackie, your copies are with me. I'll get them signed by Kakwenza before he leaves this conversation. And we'll have it delivered to you, Jackie, tomorrow. But Kakwenza, where can people get copies of your book?
My copies, my books are Book Point, that is in Golobi Village Mall. I saw copies there. Uganda Bookshop. Then in Tinda, there is that supermarket called, forgetting the name of the supermarket. There is as you're going to the stretcher, Capital Shoppers. Yes, yes, there is a library called Just Reading Library up around Centenary Bank.
Yeah.
Yes, there are copies of the Greedy Barbarian. The Banana Republic, it is not yet in the bookshop.
Yeah.
Bookshops, but actually we have few copies. We have, I think at home I have around 20 copies only. You can just give me a call and you have your copy delivered.
Okay.
I don't think bookshops can sell these books.
Carry them. Why do you think they can't carry your books? I mean, they've carried many other books. Kobo Sinje's book is on the bookshelf in bookstores. Why wouldn't they carry it?
I tried Aristoc and they said no.
Okay.
Yes. But
Did they give you a reason why they couldn't carry your book?
No, they said no only. They did not even give me any reason.
Okay. Okay. I think that bookstores are afraid to carry books that have become controversial, such as yours, perhaps for fear of repercussion by the powers that be.
I think.
Some might say Dr. Kizza Besigye's sister's book is at a restock. It's on the shelves. It's critical of government, the correct line. Daniel Kalnachi's book, The Unfinished Revolution, is being carried by bookstores. Why wouldn't they carry yours?
Because it is a personal account of what I went through, telling the whole world how the military can actually pull me from my bed naked and take me, and they hang me, and they beat me, they punch my eyes, they damage my kidneys, they do everything nasty. Okay. So I don't think that.
Asking again, can we purchase this book online? Is there an online store that carries the book?
It is not yet online.
Are you wanting to get it online for people to be able to buy your book?
Yes, I am.
Okay, fantastic. I just want to go back to the beginning of your book, The Banner Republic, which is an account of your torture and detention in the hands of the chieftaincy of military intelligence in Uganda. You have been a pretty, some may say stubborn character. In your book, you recount in your early childhood how you wrote an essay about your English school teacher because of the manner of his dressing, and that what happened later on then subsequently inspired you to write the work you're writing. Can you share a little bit about that? I found that very interesting.
So actually a long time ago when I was in my secondary school, our literature teacher gave us an assignment that we should write about anything, just write an essay about anything. So I used to hate that teacher a lot. So I went home and I wrote about him. I wrote about how he used to dress, about his tattered shoes. So we submitted our work. So when he brought the work back, I did not find mine. So I asked him, where is my work? He said, I have your work. So after the class, he tells me, please, follow me. Was like, now, this one has known that I wrote about him and he's going to beat me up. So we reach outside and he tells me, no, Kakwenza, you are a very perfect writer, descriptive language. So he tells me, you wrote perfectly about me, and I'm not going to punish you, but it is very bad to, abuse your teacher. And definitely I had not abused my teacher, no, I had written sense. When after reading my work, he changed. He bought a new shirt, he bought new shoes, he bought a new, he bought new pants. So he came changed. When I saw him, I was like, now this one has read my descriptive essay. That is why he has changed. So he told me, you are a great writer. I'm not going to punish you, and I'm not going to give you a work. You actually scored highly, more than everyone in the class. So he really encouraged me. Since then, I was like, now, he encouraged me. So Mr. Museveni, when I put the injustices in a satire, and instead of changing, and he instead actually arrests me and tortures me, I do not understand.
Let me read from the book on page 19, Kakwenza. You write that the English teacher, despite my satire and ridicule I had penned in the essay, respected my freedom of expression. Instead of reproaching me, he encouraged me and continued to give me guidance the entire time I was at school. He pulled me closer to him, and I began to drink from his cup of wisdom. I started to realize that my hate for him was kind of based on a twin shackle of bandwagonism and prejudice, which would have squandered the opportunity for me to be equipped with relevant knowledge that I would use after many years to publish a book, one of the best-selling books in Uganda. What lessons do you think that the current leadership will learn from your teacher, your humble teacher, whom you ridicule in a work of creativity? And do you think that people like those who work for CMI are perhaps in the same bandwagon and prejudice that you suffered before your encounter with the teacher?
The only thing the government can do right now is to read my book, The Greedy Barbarian, and they see the basic things I wrote about, the injustices I wrote about, and they correct them. They should read this Banana Republic, and they actually, I don't know whether they have actually, when I went there, when they took me this recent time, I found when they had a soft copy of my book. I don't know where they got it from. They should read it critically, and they should understand that torturing a writer for writing about his experience, or for writing about impunity, writing about injustice, it is one way of communicating, expressing myself. If I express myself condemning impunity, condemning injustice, condemning human rights abuse, I should not, I should not be threatened. I should not be picked up like a chicken for slaughter. So they should really work on the things we raise in our publications instead of arresting us and torturing us.
Maybe you should mail a copy to the president, the leaders in this country to be able to read. We're happy to help you send copies to those offices if they will read. We are coming nearly to the end. We have about 15 minutes to go. So this is just another opportunity for anybody who is on the webinar who would want to contribute. Just raise your hand. We will see your hand and give you a chance to participate. If you prefer to send a chat message, please do. Follow us on our social media platforms, on Twitter at Chapter 4 UG, on Facebook on the same account where this discussion is going on. This discussion will continue in the hope that we can push back against the narrative of repression against artists, writers, and people in the media, especially in the run-up to the election, because we believe that elections are about the contest of ideas. There cannot be a free and fair election if ideas cannot flourish in the marketplace of democracy. In fact, if you stop people from discussing, stop people from writing, you undermine the legitimacy of the election. So we continue to urge leaders, those in power, to respect fundamental rights and freedoms, especially for artists and writers, especially in this kind of elections that we are going into, a digital election. Another question here for you, Kakwenza, is from Mr. Arthur Nsereko. Arthur Nsereko is the coordinator of the Network of Public Interest Lawyers at the Makerere School of Law. He asked, I don't know where they got your soft copy. He's quoting you what you said. When you were arrested, you could see that they had a soft copy of your work on their computer. And he asked, is it possible that your writing gadgets are compromised? Do you think there's a bug in your computers?
I actually do not know. I don't know, maybe they hacked my email. I don't know where, honestly speaking, I don't know where or how they accessed my soft copy. Because even when I went to SIU, when they were working on my bond, the lady who worked on me actually had the copy of the book in her phone. So I don't really know whether they bugged my computer or my phone and they accessed the copy, the soft copy, because I did not send it to anyone.
Are you open to having your computer, your phones perhaps checked by experts to see if there are tracking devices, if there are malwares that may have been used to track you? If you want to do that, Chapter 4 Uganda can work with its partners to make sure that that is done for you. Again, we cannot emphasize more the need for digital security. Another comment here coming from somebody named DM, I'm not sure I think it might be no longer Diana, I think. It says, I'm just so sad. I have no idea where we're heading, especially in these coming months. Maybe the fund needs to grow to include other people besides artists. I couldn't agree more. We must fight for the rights of everybody. And Arthur Serico comes back. He says, well, on a lighter note, I trust Arthur to be able to crack a joke in this kind of situation. Maybe they're actually reading the soft copy. Do you think it's a good idea they have the soft copy? And that he says, let's wait for change. Maybe the soft copy can help them to read and they might change their minds about you. You think they're reading your soft copy?
I think, during the recent interrogation when I was taken, the emphasis was much on the forward of the book. They're like, why do you involve Museveni in everything you write about on Facebook or in newspaper articles? Why do you involve Museveni? So they appreciated me for writing their impunity, describing the impunity very well in the book. But they had to beat me up for more than 6 hours because of the forward. I think, and when I was being arrested this time, I asked why, because I was acquitted in court. They were like, you know your issues with the State House. Even when I was, when they were processing my bond, even SID, CMI, they had to seek for permission from someone from State House. So I don't know who orders from my arrest in State House.
Are you suggesting that the Chieftaincy of Military Intelligence and the SIU officers who process your bond were under instructions from what is commonly known as orders from above? And would you know where that came from?
Of course, they told me. The director of SIU said, no, I have no authority. He had to first call at CMI. At CMI, they had to first call somewhere. So I don't know where is that somewhere.
Okay. Ever since your release, Kakwenza, what have you been up to? Are you still writing? Are you writing again?
Of course, you cannot give up just like that. So I've been documenting my recent arrest. I've just finished documenting, and I'm working on another book, which will be out, I think, next year.
Okay. Fantastic. So we look forward to your next book. And I just wanted to read here very briefly a statement from chapter 4 in regards to censorship. But before I do that, I just wanted to highlight that censorship takes the forms that we have seen: brutal force, beating of people, that would then scare others from writing, the arrest of journalists that force many media houses into self-censorship of fear of offending the powers that be. But there's also a more nefarious form of censorship. A report by an international group called Privacy International revealed that the Ugandan state is involved in filtering information, that the web, the internet that comes into this country is laced with filters that suppresses certain kinds of information. They identify 5 categories of information as being, filtered: information about the first family, information about corruption, information about sexual minorities. And so there's a more nefarious, hidden form of censorship that I think we must also pay special attention to. There are reports about the Ugandan state procuring software from mainly Israeli companies that hack into people's private communication, WhatsApp, Facebook. I think we must also pay special attention to those kind of use of malware to target people, especially in the media. But now just to the statements that I wanted to read on behalf of chapter 4 before we close in about 5 minutes, if there are no other comments. We are deeply concerned by the regulations that were put in place by the Ministry of ICT that's being implemented by the Uganda Communications Commission, and urge government to withdraw the regulations and reconsider having them dropped altogether. We also think that activities and things like what has happened to Mr. Kakwenza is work that would stifle debates, violate human rights and the rights of others. In specific regard to the election, in May 2019, the media regulator ordered, that's the Uganda Communications Commission, ordered 7 radio stations and 6 television stations to immediately suspend 39 journalists after the stations covered the opposition politician, Honorable Robert Chagulanyi, commonly referred to as Bobby Wine, and his violent arrest by the Uganda police force. The development came on the backdrop of a spate of activities to censure the opposition leaders, pro-democracy activists, and human rights defenders from participating in public discussion through the introduction of the regulations that we have expressed concerns about. The steps taken by the state in handling publications of the nature described above impede media freedom, impair artistic expressions, and threaten academic freedoms. It seeks to shield the state from constructive criticism, satire, and ultimately leads to the state censorship, and in many cases drive people into self-censorship. We urge everybody to resist unjust laws and express their rights and defend their rights. As Chapter 4, we will be here to offer pro bono legal support in defense of civil and political rights. I have one other comment here from DN. DN says, I think that the soft copy is made available, then it would be easy to go around. However, many worry that it loses out on that income. Have you considered, Kakwenza, that perhaps circulating soft copies on WhatsApp, even for free, serves a better public interest, public good for others who may not have the time to get their hands on a hard copy? Do you want to think about circulating those soft copies perhaps on WhatsApp? Are you able to do so?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that.
Okay.
But, this is a work of human rights awareness, human rights violations. So I'm considering giving it out for free.
Yeah.
The main purpose of publishing and selling right now is to cover the publishing costs. Yes.
Well, fantastic. I mean, we are happy to find ways on how we can help you in that regard as Chapter 4 Uganda. But what are your closing remarks? We're coming to the end of this discussion. What are your closing remarks to those who have patiently sat throughout this discussion, Mr. Kakwenza?
First of all, thank you so much, Council Nicholas Opiyo. Thank you so much, Chapter 4 Uganda, for giving me the platform. There are very many torture victims out there who are not given a platform. And most importantly, they have not documented their torture ordeal or their victimization ordeal. I'm glad that I am actually the first Ugandan to document my ordeal. And I'm glad that when I documented it, you guys are helping me publicize it. You're giving me a platform. And I'm thanking everyone who has listened in. Thank you for giving me a word of hope. Thank you. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Great. Kakwenza, we are full of admiration for your courage, your creativity, and your sense of public duty. We continue to offer you our support and hope that your next coming works will be as provoking as this one is. We have deep admiration for you. We cannot overstate our admiration for your work, and we can only wish you our very best. But to also encourage those who want to write, please write. The best way to express yourself in ways that nobody can deny you is by writing. So please write. I see a message from Mr. Sam Suga from the African Center for the Treatment and Rehabilitation of Torture Victims, ACTV. He says, thank you very much for your courage to tell your story. We truly appreciate it. Thank you very much, Sam Suga, and everybody else who has stayed here and listened in. Just a quick word that the Chapter 4 Uganda HRC Human Rights Convention series will continue. We've had Perry Arutua was our guest here together with Frank Fukuyama and Larry Diamond. We've had the chance to host Nanjala, a Kenyan writer. We look forward to the next discussion. I hope that all of you can join us again. But before I leave, let me just say the following things on behalf of Chapter 4. We must be able to make fun of our leaders. We must accept satire as a useful form of expression. Artists such as the Bazongoto group, stage actors, musicians, are really the philosophers of our time. They capture people's imagination and have the power of changing this country for good. Let's please respect the rights of artists, writers, and especially the media. In the run-up to the election, this election will be meaningless unless we demonstrate that we respect the rights of the media. We cannot say this election is going to be largely conducted on digital forms and on media, while on the other hand, we are clamping hard on media practitioners. We are assaulting journalists. We are involved in crude, brutal acts of censorship. These acts are archaic. These acts are indeed barbarian, as the book by Kakwenza suggests. Any state or government, what is sought, would encourage, as opposed to impede discussion, we allow people to express themselves. Because experience and history has shown us that you cannot suppress people for too long. Sooner or later, something is going to give. We hope that we can, in the interest of the peace and the rights of Ugandans, be able to allow them to express themselves. In cases where people have been acting in unlawful manners, we've had government officials say, those are only acts of errant officers, it's not the government position. But you become complicit if you do nothing about it. If you allow the CMI to torture people like Kakwenza, to hold them illegally and waterboard them and lock them up in toilets, and you do nothing about it. You become complicit when you allow people like ISO, the Internal Security Organization, to run safe houses on Kalangada Islands and in many parts of this country. Houses in which reports in Parliament have indicated are nothing but torture chambers. So if this not the state policy, would urge the state to actively begin to hold to account individuals who are involved in this kind of actions. We also urge the DPP. In many cases, we have filed cases against individual people for violating human rights, for violating the rights of other people. The DPP is quick to take over these prosecutions, and we don't see results. Permit private prosecutions if you are committed to holding people to account, because there are lawyers out here who are willing to hold people to account and to make sure that we protect the rights of others. We ask development partners to be able to, in their relationship with the government of Uganda, stand up for the values that they profess. And let me end here by reading a powerful comment from Dr. Peter Mesige from the African Center for Media Excellence. Peter says, continue speaking truth to power. I can't say that enough. Continue speaking truth to power. Kakwenza, I applaud you for your courage, and thank you, Chapter 4, for hosting this conversation. Thank you, Dr. Peter. Thank you for taking time to listen to us. We hope you'll join us again next time. To everyone who has been tuning in, we have come to the end of our conversation because we do not want to get caught up in the curfew. Kakwenza, again, thank you very much. We look forward to reading more of your works. Have a good evening, everyone.